I hit a point where I'm like, I'm going to find out who the fuck this is. I was so sick and tired of this for going on for so many years. It had been at least a decade probably by this point. First of all, I'm a woman. I have more skills than the FBI, so I was going to find out who this was. You know, the police weren't going to help me because this guy hadn't overtly threatened me, hadn't claimed to be stalking me, hadn't done any of these things that would be considered in the realm of criminal. However, the consistent actions, the things he was saying, the things that were happening, the consistency of it, the length of it, were all extremely alarming for me, extremely concerning for me, scary for me, made me worry if somebody was watching me. His behavior put me in fear regardless. So I did what any self-respecting woman would do, and I started looking at the dick pics. Yeah, that's right. I started analyzing all of the photos. And that's when things finally started adding up. Most of the photos were heavily blotched out. I know there was one photo where he's in typical guy dick pic pose. He's laying down. He's got his dick covering his face like this. But in the background, right behind his head, was a picture. That picture was blanked out. So I'm going to assume that picture had something that would clearly say who he was. In others, it would have parts of the background, just blotched out next to, his junk. There was some, however, where things weren't all blacked out. And for anybody who wasn't aware or paying attention to the details, wouldn't have made those connections. In the one picture, the guy was wearing Steelers boxers. I am not a sports fan. I don't follow sports. I am not about that life. I don't care. I go shopping with my cat and I do animal rescue. That's what I do. So I put Steelers into my mental bank. And as I'm thinking, do I know anybody that likes the Steelers? Is there anybody I know that likes the Steelers enough that they'd have Steelers boxers? And I couldn't think of anyone. But then there was the photo that sealed the deal. The one photo, it was heavily blocked out everywhere else. But in the background of the photo, off just to the very, very edge of the picture, was a bookshelf. And on the bookshelf, I could see what looked like potentially read books or something. I decided to zoom in on the bookshelf. And they weren't books. They were CIB Sega Genesis games. They looked in mint condition. They were very good titles. And then I started to think, who would I know that would have a decent, good condition Sega Genesis collection? And I couldn't think of anyone right away. And I was trying to figure out, who do I know? I've been playing and buying games for years. I have a Sega Genesis collection myself, but I'm not a big Sega Genesis collector. Do I know anybody that is? A lot of the people I knew that had Sega Genesis collections were more recent friends, not friends that I had had over the extent of how long that this person had harassed me. I had to start thinking much older than recently, of course. So I had to start really thinking, who back in the day did I know? So a friend of mine that I know had made a Facebook post, and I hadn't seen her post in a very long time. So I saw the post and I thought to myself, oh shit, I haven't seen this chick in ages. I wonder how she's doing. And it got me thinking of, our friend group, the people we knew. And then that was when it hit me like a ton of fucking bricks. Keith was a Sega Genesis collector. So I decided to look up Keith's Facebook page. I remembered his name. I put in a couple variations of his last name just to make sure I was spelling it right. And sure enough, his name pops up and his banner cover for his Facebook profile is the Steelers. And that is when I really knew that I had potentially found out who had been harassing me for so many years. By this time, not seen or heard from this individual in years. Not only had I not seen or heard from this individual in years, it was years after our friendship that the harassment even started. It was really wild to me why this person would have ended up being the person. And I need to mention, the entire time that he crashed on my couch, he was never disrespectful. There was nothing that led me at that time to believe that this person was off the deep end. Keith was not somebody that I had any form of a relationship with. There was no connection whatsoever, aside from we were friends in a friend group. We both enjoyed games, and he crashed on my couch for about 3 months. Now things get even more wild. I am not originally from the city I lived in at the time. I am born and raised in Toronto. So I did not grow up in the city that I was living in. However, my ex-husband did. So my ex-husband made a very vague Facebook post, and he was like, hey guys, does anybody know this name? Has anybody heard of this guy? And that was pretty much it. It did not take long at all for the messages to come flooding in. A longtime friend of my ex-husband's had started messaging him stating that his fiance, I believe now wife, I'm not sure, worked at Boston Pizza. And while she worked at Boston Pizza, Keith worked in the kitchen. At the time, several of the waitresses were getting harassing messages. They were getting dick pics, inappropriate, explicit pictures sent to them, inappropriate messages. And to my knowledge, they eventually found out it was Keith, and Keith was fired from Boston Pizza for sexual harassment. The more I digged on Keith, the more I found out that there was a slew of years of sexual harassment against other women that he was perpetrating online. I don't know if any legal action has ever been taken against him. As mentioned earlier, I went to the police numerous times with the photos and, the messages. But again, he wasn't threatening to kill me. He didn't flat out say he was following me, and his messages could be construed as completely just like somebody that just knows me. So I started finding out really disturbing details about Keith. However, it only continues to get crazier.